Hello, everyone. Welcome back to GOPO. Today, we're going to be finishing up Chapter 6, which is about the National Judiciary. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that they do in those offices, and we're also going to talk about how they can decide on court cases, whether they want to be active or restrain their powers. So when they look at court cases, they are basically going to have two different court cases to look over. They both state and federal courts have jurisdiction over criminal and civil law, the two I'm talking about right here. Criminal law is basically something that is you're figuring out crime and you're looking at things that can harm a community. And if you get in trouble for it, you get either fined or you get some type of punishment, including going to jail. Governments try to prove the guilt of the defendant, and it's their job to prove it. So you are innocent until proven guilty. They have to prove that you're guilty in order to throw you in jail. Civil law is just basically dealing with disputes between two groups. Of these cases, the most common type of criminal law case in the country is for burglary, and the number one type of civil law case in the country, sadly enough, is for divorce. State courts do definitely take the vast majority of cases in the United States, which should make sense because there's only one federal government, but there's 50 state governments. So they're going to have 50 sets of state courts and one set of federal courts. Like I said, they handle both civil and criminal cases. They basically structure their courts very similar to the national government, where they have, instead of a district court at the lowest level, they have what are known as circuit courts or trial courts. And then if people don't like the decision there, they can take it to the state appellate court. And if they don't like the decision there, they could take it to the state Supreme Court. Whereas just like with the federal government, get out of there. You have, get that down. No, sorry. Hang on. Oh my gosh, this is terrible. Anyway, going back, there we go. You have federal courts, district courts, you've got the state federal courts of appeal, and then the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can take any type of case. We actually have what's known as like a 3-layered pyramid of cases at the federal level. The lowest level, in the one that takes the most cases, is the district courts. There's 94 of them. They have original jurisdiction, meaning they always hear cases for the very first time. After that are the Court of Appeals. There's 13 of them total, and they only have appellate jurisdiction. They can only hear cases on appeal. They can never hear a case for the first time. And they basically review the decisions of the lower courts. And then the very top is the one is the Supreme Court of the United States. We just put SCOTUS for short. They will resolve differences between states. They will resolve differences of decisions. They can take court cases on appeal. They can take original cases. They can take whatever they want. They get to choose which cases they want to take. There's one court. Okay, that's it. 9 justices, and we've had the 9 since 1869. We've had that number set for a while. So if you look at this map, you're going to see all the different areas of the white lines show the areas of the district courts by state. So you can see that in Illinois, for instance, we have 3 district courts, federal district courts. And then when it comes to appellate courts, they cover multiple states. So like we're in circuit number 7 for the Court of Appeals. So how do they decide to take on cases? Because the Supreme Court gets to pretty much choose whatever they want to do. They decide to take cases it wants to hear on appeal. It does it to take on the case, and if they decide to do it, it's got to issue. It issues its decisions based on the merits of the case and applicable law. So they look at, okay, are we going to take this case? Is it important enough? And if we do, we have to make sure we're being unbiased and solely objective when making these decisions. The lower court, so what will happen is lower court litigants, meaning like especially in this case, the defendants, will petition the court, please take my case, please, please, please. And they get thousands of cases that are appeal to the Supreme Court every single year, but they basically take anywhere between like 75 and 100. So they pretty much deny 99% of the appeals that are sent to them. But if there's a case that they like, the way that it gets sent up is if you follow the rule of four. So the rule of four says that if 4 of the 9 justices want the case, they take it. So they issue what's known as a writ of certiorari, and they send that to the lower courts. And it's just a piece of paper saying, look, we want the case, send it up. So once they make a decision, that decision establishes precedent, which is the basically rule for the future. So I'll give you a good example. Probably the most famous court case at the Supreme Court level that set a precedent was Plessy versus Ferguson, where they decided that separate but equal was constitutional at the time. So for a very long time, it set that precedent. And if they believe in the idea that they look at this case and they decide we like the decision the lower courts made, they claim what's known as stare decisis, which means let the decision stand. So that's them taking cases. And as you can see, they have not taken over time a lot of cases. They take less and less each year. They let the lower courts make those decisions. They trust them. So let's say you're the litigant and you ask the Supreme Court, please hear my case. And all of a sudden they say, yeah, we're going to hear your case. Oh my gosh, what do you do? Well, you will submit your argument to the court and you get to have 30 minutes. Each side gets to have 30 minutes to make their argument. But before you go, since you are at the Supreme Court, you might get the opportunity to have expert advice and expert information given to you beforehand. That's known as amicus curiae, which is basically, let's say you are taking a case to the Supreme Court about gun rights and you are pro-gun. You might have all your information, but the NRA would be very interested in you winning this case. So they might submit a ton of facts and information to you in an amicus curiae brief, which basically says, hey, use these facts in your argument. They'll totally help you win over your argument. That's what that is. They're not part of the case. It's you and someone else, but they might see this as a, hey, maybe I'll get them to help get our cause pushed even further through the court. So when the court gets your case, you get to make they're just sitting in their panel of 9. You get to make your argument for 30 minutes. The other side gets to make their argument for 30 minutes, and then that's it. And then they meet together and make a decision. And once they make that decision, they have to write and explain to the country why they made that decision. So those are known as opinions. Now, there's one that always has to be done, which is the majority opinion. The majority opinion, basically, think of it as like a 15 to 20 page like argumentative essay as to why we made this decision. And courts can look back on those decisions and see, oh, okay, this was a similar case. This is why they came up with this. We'll keep it the same or change it, whatever. Now, sometimes you can have a concurring opinion where that person agreed with the decision of the majority, but for a different reason. So let's say in my guns rights case, they went 7-2 in favor of me and guns rights. The majority opinion might solely talk about the Second Amendment, where concurring opinion might talk about the Ninth Amendment. Yeah, I did agree that they have the right to guns, but for the Ninth, not necessarily for the Second. So in my court case that I'm making up, I told you it was a 7-2 decision. Somebody from the dissenting side has to write an opinion onto why they voted against the majority. And again, it's an argumentative essay saying why we didn't write this or vote that way. The only time a dissenting opinion never has to be written is if it's a 9-0 vote. Skip that for now. So I want you to just think about this while you're looking at some FRQs and stuff. Why does having separate state and federal courts lead to conflicts under our system of federalism? Obviously, there's always conflicts, but why in the court system? And should the Supreme Court hear more or less? That's just your opinion on that. All right, the last thing is we're looking at how the court is involved in making policy decisions. So we're going to see how they make decisions when they're actually on the court. So one way that they could interpret, when they're making decisions, they have to decide, do I want to use judicial restraint or activism? And I'll explain each of them. So judicial restraint is the philosophy where the justices interpret the Constitution in a way where they would be cautious of overturning any type of law. So they basically want to make sure that they're not making decisions that's going to change laws drastically in a way that could affect the country. So they basically say, we're just here just in case we need to like look at something pretty serious, but in reality, we think that the lawmaking process should stick with the legislative and executive branches. We shouldn't make decisions that will totally overthrow laws. Um, Whereas judicial activism, they believe the opposite. They believe that with the power of judicial review, they should be making decisions where policies are created by the courts with their decisions. So, for instance, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we saw a ton of judicial activism with court cases like Miranda versus Arizona and Roe versus Wade and Gideon versus Wainwright, where they basically overturned state and federal laws with their decisions. Um, Basically, they do this in the idea that other like lawmaking branches they make mistakes by making laws that are popular by the people at the time, and they are biased and they are political, whereas we're unbiased and we should be making the decisions on policy because we're using just the law to do it, not necessarily using our political influences or doing it because of reciprocity or doing it because we want the vote from the American people. But they do, even with judicial activism, it seems like they have a lot of power with that. But remember, there are a lot of restraints on the court in the name of checks and balances that was part of the Madisonian model. Remember, in order to be a member of the court, whether it's a Supreme Court, an appellate court, or a district court at the national level, the president has to nominate you and the Senate has to confirm you. So they do have choice over whether you get a job or not. And Congress can set the size and jurisdictions of these courts. They could get rid of all the lower level courts if they wanted to, or they could double them in size. Congress gets to decide that, and they get to decide how many people are in it. They get to decide how many Supreme Court justices there are. I know there's been a lot of talk lately about if the Democrats win the election, should they pack the courts? We saw that with FDR. He wanted Congress to do that as well, change the size of the Supreme Court in particular. They can also write legislation that impacts or modifies the decision. I'll give you a good example of that. So the court case Texas versus Johnson was a flag burning case, and the court found that flag burning was constitutional. It's freedom of speech. But the vast majority of Americans don't like it. Even though it's freedom of speech, they don't like that. So Congress later made a law that said it was illegal to flag burn. So and then eventually the Supreme Court overruled that too. But Congress can do things like that. What if no one implements the plan? What if, like we saw with Brown versus Board, it said schools in the South must be integrated. You must have no more black and white separate schools. You have it where black and white kids go to school together. Well, the South, the Jim Crow laws and the Southern governments, they weren't implementing that. They're like, I'm not doing this. I don't agree with it. So that's another check that limits the Supreme Court and their power. So you see that happen a lot where people, they might make the decisions in the court, but they actually have to like rely on other people to actually implement it. Some things that have been controversial with the Supreme Court is that they make decisions very similar to what I said with the Texas versus Johnson, where people might not like their decision. We also see that when they get cases like that, they don't. The nice thing for them is if they're truly following the letter of the law, they don't have to worry about like, well, I better make this decision because I'm going to get voted out of because most people don't like it. And that's like with the flag burning one. Most people don't like flag burning. Most people think it's wrong. But it is constitutional. Most people don't like the Ku Klux Klan. The vast majority think what they preach is wrong, but their right to protest in a way that doesn't cause violence is protected. And the court doesn't have to worry about following the letter of the law in the name of being popular because they're insulated. So, and they're like that on purpose so that they could make objective decisions based on the letter of the law versus the court of public opinion. They don't have to worry about that. So that's it for the notes for chapter 6. The last branch of government we're going to talk about is the bureaucracy, and that will be with chapter 7. I'll see you later.